Hello and welcome to COS Indiana Live as we bring you Roundtable. The Roundtable segment is presented here every fourth Monday of the month at 7 p.m. We'll be focusing on education and discussion of the topics and challenges we all face as we use the Constitution to save the Constitution. Join us now as we bring you COS Indiana Roundtable with our MC, John Ackerman.
Welcome to COS Indiana Roundtable. I'm your host, John Ackerman. This is broadcast number 159 of COS Indiana Live, and we're glad you're here. Joining me in a few moments will be our state leadership team, plus a special guest. Our topic tonight will be Government Overreach. The Convention of States project is calling for an Article 5 Convention of States to propose constitutional amendments pertaining to three things: term limits, fiscal responsibility, and restraining the scope and reach of the federal government. It's that last issue that this roundtable is about: reining in government overreach. If you have a question about government overreach, you can ask it right now. If you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube, just click the comment button and enter your question. Joining me now is Ken Kashuba, our state communications coordinator. He will be monitoring your questions and comments. Hi, Ken. Welcome back to the broadcast.
Thank you. Good to be back. How are you?
So you're going to be looking at those questions and comments, eh?
I'm going to be watching that chat board, John, and we'll be jumping in here in case anybody has any questions, and I'm sure there'll be something.
Okay, and you're going to try to get them on the screen for us, right?
I will bring them up for you and ring your bell. Yep.
Okay, appreciate that. So viewer, at any time during the program, you can click the comment button and post your question or comment. Ken will get as many of them as possible into the program. Now, you can also email the roundtable at raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. Again, that's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. After the roundtable conversation on government overreach has completed, we'll invite you to join Convention of States and show you how to volunteer to help us make a difference. Before bringing the panel on, let me ask you to help us grow the audience by clicking that like and share button and by making a comment or asking a question. You see, the Facebook and YouTube algorithms notice viewer responses. They know that something's going on and then they show it to more of their users. So help us grow the audience by making a comment and by clicking those like and share buttons. And now we welcome our roundtable participants. Coming up first is our new state grassroots coordinator, Dale Tipton. Hi, Dale.
Good afternoon.
Yes, and Marty Woods, our state legislative liaison. Welcome back, Marty.
Good evening.
Gary Harbaugh is part of our Indiana team. Hi, Gary.
Hi, John.
And Mr. Dale Parrish, our state director.
Oh,
welcome
John.
back, Dale. And joining, well, there's Ken again. Okay. Joining our regular panel members is Vicki Mooring. Welcome, Vicki. Okay, Vicky, I think you're muted. Okay, hi, Vicky.
Good evening.
Tell us where you live in Indiana, would you?
I live in Huntington County, close to Roanoke.
Okay, and what's your connection to Convention of States, Indiana?
I am a regional captain for Region 5, Region 5.
Okay, you enjoying your work as a region captain?
I am.
Okay, that's good to know. Well, our topic tonight is government overreach. The good news on this front is that in the recently concluded term of the Supreme Court, several decisions were announced that really help rein in the scope and reach of the federal government. And we'll be looking at some of those decisions during this roundtable. First, in two separate rulings, the court protected religious liberty, speaking out against government overreach. In the first case, the court invalidated a Maine tuition program, ruling that the state cannot bar religious schools from receiving public grants extended to other private schools. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, said the tuition program promotes stricter separation of church and state than the Constitution requires. And then second, the court sided with a former high school football coach who was fired after leading post-game prayers on the 50-yard line. Justice Neil Gorsuch, writing for the majority, said the coach's prayers at the public school event were protected by the Constitution's guarantees of free speech and religious exercise, and did not violate the prohibition on government endorsement of religion. So those two cases are good news indeed concerning the free practice of religion. So I want to ask Vicky, first of all, since you're our guest here, what is the significance of these rulings in safeguarding self-government?
Well, I think it's stopping the progressive left from further removing religious beliefs from our life.
Okay, that's a good point. Any member of the panel want to chime in on that? Dale, you're Dale Tipton. You're new to the round table here. You have a thought on this question? What's the significance of this?
Well, I was kind of interested in your comment, I think, from the Chief Justice, talking about the separation of church and state whenever there is no separation of church and state outlined in the Constitution to begin with. And so
That's right.
That's a little bit of a fallacy, I think. But the trend has been for years and years, I guess even for decades, for religion to be removed from the town square and to make it separate from everything else that goes on. We've seen, the 10 Commandments taken down in places of leadership and state meeting houses and those kind of things. And it really has never made any sense to me. So I think this ruling, the court, they really seem to be looking at this and taking a hard look at, well, what did the founders really want, as opposed to operating under an ideology that would dictate how they made a decision. So I say more power to them.
Okay. Marty, you have a thought?
Yeah, I think, this is for the first time in several years where the court has started to look at the Constitution with the intent, that it was, written, that powers not specifically enumerated or outlined in the Constitution are remanded to the states. And that's what they did. They finally recognized that these were state issues and they weren't in the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, Dale Parrish.
Yeah, John, I want the ruling on the high school football coach is one that really caught my attention. And I really do think, if I understand this right, this coach was not requiring all of his players to participate, was not requiring. This was something he was doing as an individual. And I was really glad to see them rule in favor of this. And because this is, this is part of our self-governance. This is part of being self-governed, is being able to express your religious beliefs. So I thought this was a very good example of self-governance.
Yeah, we had a pro football player who this ruling came. He didn't take his case to court, but he knelt and prayed in the touchdown in the end zone every time, and he got drummed out of football.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes.
Gary, I think you had a comment.
Yeah, John, there were 6 cases that the court ruled in this last term that I think the overall theme there was that they were recognizing that we, the people, have inalienable rights, and the state can't take these rights away, these religious rights. The case we've talked about, there was also a case involving the EPA, whereas the EPA was just making up rules that were limiting people's rights. New York State was trying to limit the Second Amendment rights of people. They were also making workplace rules that were taking away people's rights. And so the government was, under the guise of making these workplace rules, was really taking away the rights of we the people. And I think the overall theme of this really was a recognition that we the people have some inalienable rights, and government, whether it's state or federal, can't just willy-nilly take these rights away.
Yeah, this was a real win for self-governance in this
Mm-hmm.
recent term of the Supreme Court. And we're going to be talking about some of those that you mentioned there. And Ken, do we have a viewer comment?
Well, we do. I just wanted to add to that too, that I see the significance in the fact that it really does matter that we find judges that rule by the Constitution, and elections do matter. We put judges in place that look at the Constitution and make their rulings on the Constitution, and they're not just put in there because of the race or gender or color or skin or whatever. And we did have a comment. Susan Lyons said that she wanted to know, back on Dale's comment, what happens to the coaches when they're upheld by the court? Do they get their jobs back? Courts costs, back pay, that kind of things.
Boy, Susan Lyon, that's a great question, and I don't know an answer to that. Ken, while we're talking about that, you might be able to do something to increase the volume of your microphone. We can hear you, but not very well. Does anyone have a thought on Susan's question? That's pretty good. Dale.
Well, that's that would be nice to know the answer to that. But if he didn't get his job back and so forth and so on, he should.
I'm not a lawyer, but I used to watch Perry Mason, and so I'm thinking that coach could file a civil lawsuit to recover back pay and to get his job back if he wanted to.
Yeah, I was going to suggest Gary probably be in a good position to answer this from a legal perspective.
Yeah, Gary, you have a thought?
Yeah, I think actually that he was awarded back pay and so forth in his lawsuit. So he did, come out, was made financially whole. And I think he was, told that they had to give him his job back. So it was kind of an all-around win for the coach.
Sometimes the good guys win, huh?
That's what we like.
Okay, Ken, do we have anything else from viewers on that particular issue?
Well, not on that particular issue. And can you hear me better now?
Okay. So, well, I want to move on. And this really, Gary kind of hinted at this when he mentioned the Second Amendment, because on the 23rd day of June, the Supreme Court issued its biggest gun rights ruling in more than a decade. They voted 6-3, and in that ruling, they struck down a New York law that requires gun owners to have, quote, proper cause to carry a gun. I think proper cause is just in the Second Amendment, isn't it? The right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. But I have a question about that, striking down that New York state law. Why is the Second Amendment so critically important in preserving freedom? And Vicki, as our guest, you get first crack at that. What do you say, Vicki? Why is the Second Amendment so important in preserving our freedoms?
I think it's important because it's the only safeguard we have in protecting our freedom from big government.
Okay,
I
Marty.
think that's why they put it in there.
Okay, yeah, I think you're exactly right. Marty, you want to add to that?
Well, as a prior New York resident at one point in my career, this was something that I've been watching, and then, as you guys know, I've been following the Second Amendment issues through Indiana for the last couple of years. But the founding fathers, we had to go to war with England to win our freedom back, and the whole concept of militias, which was not an army at that time, it was citizens, it was volunteers, from the respective states that showed up to fight. That was the context in which they put the Second Amendment into place. They saw that ultimately taking up arms against a tyrant or a tyrannical government may be the only solution remaining.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we think we've become very civilized over the last 250 years, but nonetheless, look at where we are. Look at some of the issues that are still there that happened that are founded in our founding. And while our militias are gone, maybe that's something we should never have let go of. Was our citizen armies, to within each state, because that's the only thing that's not only preventing a tyrannical government within this country from occurring, although it's heading that way, but it's also the only thing that is preventing invasion from other countries. We've got more guns in this country than any other country does, and compared to other countries, we're more free as a result of it. I mean, we don't have to look at any other examples other than that. Look at what's going on in Russia, China. I mean, they don't have guns, and look at what they got.
Right.
So
yeah. Okay, Dale Tipton.
And on the personal side of that, the Second Amendment expresses an inalienable right of self-defense, which we should all have as individuals to protect ourselves and our families. And the purpose of government is supposed to be to support and protect the rights of the citizens that are its members. And so to limit the ability of any individual person to have the instrumentality to protect oneself is just really flies in the face of what our freedoms represent.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the other Dale Parrish.
Yeah, I just think we see example after example of the best solution to a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. I mean, it's just it comes down to as simple as that. The recent case down in Indianapolis, Greenwood Mall?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm a perfect example, I think. That young man saved countless lives by taking the action that he did to take out that shooter. So it's just a good guy with a gun. Apparently, that is the solution.
Too bad he wasn't in the school at Uvalde, Texas.
Isn't that the truth? Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Ken, what do you have?
Yeah, can you hear me better now? I had to switch microphones.
Nice. Coming through clear as a bell.
Okay, it was the microphone. Anyway, Susan Lyon again is commenting on just what Dale was talking about. She brings up the fact that if it was constitutional, why did we need another law?
Well, I'll
Marty,
take that one.
Marty.
I'll take that one. So, we passed that law earlier this year, constitutional carry in Indiana. It's not a right if you have to purchase a permit. And to what Dale Tipton said earlier, I mean, the statistics, testimony in supporting that law were very informative to the legislative branch. They were given information that historically low-income neighborhoods benefit the most when they don't have to, pay for a permit. Crime rates have gone down when businesses advertise, no guns allowed. That's like an invitation to people with guns, bad guys with guns, to come in. And the more there's that unknown factor that the guy next to you might have a concealed weapon, that's a huge deterrent.
Yep.
To the bad guys, because the bad guys don't care about being there. That's why they're bad guys. And so,
Yep.
it's about the good guys, being in a position to defend themselves and their neighbor. And our Constitution, even though our Constitution in Indiana said that every citizen of Indiana has the right to keep and bear arms for protection of self and state. I think it's like Article 34 in our Constitution. Our law had been technically violating that right for years because it required you to buy a permit in order to have that right. And it wasn't a very expensive permit. You still have to have a permit if you want reciprocity with other states. That just gives you our law only gives us the constitutional right in Indiana to carry a weapon in Indiana without a permit.
And I don't think anybody in the Convention of States would argue against the idea that the Second Amendment is critically important in preserving our freedoms. Okay, now I want to move on to the next issue, and it's probably the biggest news coming out of the Supreme Court last month was the Dobbs decision, the reversal of Roe and Casey. And I want to take this one step at a time, and the first two questions I'm going to throw to Gary, our legal eagle. Gary, what was the central holding in Roe v. Wade? Oh, Gary, you're muted.
I did that. He's unmuted now.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. John, the central ruling in Roe v. Wade was the court went through some verbal gymnastics of ambiguity and vagueness and uncertainty and decided that the Constitution, under perhaps privacy, gave a right to an abortion. And this ruling was always very suspect. It was poorly reasoned. Everybody knew that at the time and has known that ever since. In that ruling, the court looked at 3 trimesters of pregnancy and essentially said the first trimester, person should have essentially an unlimited right to an abortion. In the second trimester, there could be limitations on it. And in the third trimester, state governments could put a more significant basis for putting a limit on the right to an abortion. The whole ruling was pretty unworkable, and that gave rise nearly 20 years later to the Casey decision.
Yeah, and that was Planned Parenthood v. Casey, right? So, Gary, what was the central ruling in Planned Parenthood v. Casey?
So in the Planned Parenthood v. Casey case, the court kind of threw out its previous reasoning about the trimesters, partly because of medical advances, and it was just kind of an unworkable rule. And they came up with another, perhaps even more unworkable and vague rule, and that was that the states could put limits on abortion as long as they did not place an undue burden on the right to an abortion. Well, that created a tremendous amount of litigation over all the years since then about, various states, and the court had to look at it. Is this an undue burden? But that's not an undue burden, and so on. And so it created even more uncertainty, and it was really an unworkable situation. The vagueness of it gave courts the ability to strike down laws right and left that tried to put a limitation on it. And so in one state, it might be a limitation might be upheld, in another it might not. Many cases that were appealed up to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. And the whole ruling was in many ways unworkable. And during all this period of time, the pro-life battle has gone on, and the court finally had to recognize that this house of cards was not going to stand.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that brings us up to 2022, and the court heard the arguments late in 2021, I think, and then The draft opinion was leaked several weeks ago, and that created quite a stir and an uproar. And then last month, like I said, the court in the Dobbs case, the court reversed Roe and Casey. So the big question here, I'm going to give our guest Vicki first crack at it. What exactly does the Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe and Casey mean? Now, I heard somebody on the news yesterday, I think it was some elected person from somewhere, say that that the Dobbs decision outlawed abortion in America and made women second-class citizens. So I'm going to give a woman first crack at this. Vicki, what exactly does that ruling mean?
Well, that ruling means that each state can decide what to do within its own state. Some of the states are going to let the people vote, and some aren't. So I think it's a good decision.
Yeah, I think the framers of the Constitution wanted these kinds of issues to be worked out in the states, and that's the crucible where we figure out tough issues. And I think some of the states, like New York, Illinois, California, you name it, they're going to increase their abortions, and other states are going to put more restrictions on. And I think that's the way these things are supposed to be worked out. Now, Indiana has a special session of the legislature. They're going to be talking about fiscal responsibility. But I guess today they already started talking about lifting some restrictions on Indiana's abortion law. And I think here in Indiana, abortions are legal up to what, the 15th or 20th week? I'm not really up on that.
22 weeks, isn't it?
Is it 22 weeks?
Well, it's essentially up to the third trimester now because, as Gary mentioned, when the Supreme Court litigated that states could do what they wanted in that third trimester,
Yep.
Indiana actually passed the law a few years back that's been held up in court for some time. And immediately following the Dobbs case, our Attorney General got that case or that law released by the court. But that ruling had suspended third trimester abortions, by partial removal of the fetus, by dissection of the fetus.
Yeah.
And so that in effect, once you're in that third trimester, obviously other than a woman going into early labor, that eliminated that third trimester abortion prospect. And that was released immediately once he asked for that.
Okay, so that's the current status. And our House and Senate are meeting in Indianapolis this week. And one of the big issues they're talking about is more restrictions on abortion.
Right.
Now, there was a big doings down at the State House today, and I think Marty was there. Give us a little report, Marty, on what you saw.
Well, I saw a lot of crazy people down there. Obviously, this is a very personal issue for a lot of people. I think obviously, unless you're a woman in that position, it's difficult to talk to. For a man to talk to it. Next step up would be a family that's not that's involved in that situation. But nonetheless, the current draft of the bill is basically outlawing abortion in Indiana, with the exception of rape or incest, or anything that would potentially harm the woman during labor or during pregnancy or birth, or where the fetus could not survive outside of the womb on birth.
Okay.
And based on that, it sounds like a win for pro-life side of the equation. However, there's obviously all kinds of other what ifs, and many of those what ifs are in testimony One interesting thing that I learned today was that this is a matter of the article, the first Article 1 of the Constitution that goes to freedom of religion. A Jewish rabbi spoke up and said, "Look, we do not believe that up until the child is born and takes its first breath, God has not given that individual life." And that's our belief. And so up until that time, the fetus is part of the woman's body, and the woman has total responsibility for what she does with that fetus. It has nothing to do with life, and that's our belief. So if the rabbi said, if you pass this bill as currently drafted, you will violate our First Amendment rights for freedom of religion.
That's quite interesting. I had never heard that one before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's news. I had not heard that either.
So, again, there's a lot of what ifs here, and it's a very personal thing. It's all across the board, but on the other side of the equation, there was a heavy representation down there of, just totally women's rights, to do whatever they want, whenever they want, for whatever reason they want.
Okay.
Some very sympathetic testimony from women who were trying to have, children through, various other methods because they can't have children, and that if something goes, these are all very risky things, and if something goes wrong, they may have to abort. And this law would, as drafted right now, would prohibit that. Abortion could harm the woman's, life at that point. Well, the law kind of picks up for that. If, that is a case that's taken as an exception, if the woman is ever in jeopardy or the baby is ever in jeopardy, it would be allowed. But, there's people over there that want one side or the other, and there's a lot of what ifs in between.
Okay. A lot of people there, pretty hot, pretty contentious.
Yep.
And it'll go on for
about two weeks is the plan.
For 2 weeks. Okay, Ken, what do you have for us?
We have a comment and a question on this particular area. The first comment is from Cheryl Schottmeyer. She says government has no business making medical decisions for anyone, period. So glad to see that SCOTUS is relying on the Constitution and stopping their legislative tendencies. The question that follows is a good one. And that is from, again, one of our favorite guests, Susan Lyon. And she says, what can be done about the states that are approving abortion that are worded to include protections for mothers and doctors who kill babies up to 28 days after birth? It's up for approval in California.
What can be done? Wow, I don't know. Anybody
People have to get involved and voice their opinion and vote.
Okay, and Gary, you started to talk too.
Yeah, I think one of the things that there is a human life amendment that has been proposed in Congress, hasn't gotten anywhere yet, but if that were to be enacted, I think it recognizes that life begins at conception and that unborn person has the rights of a person. The other thing is that the Supreme Court kind of moves very gradually in making, typically moves gradually in making major decisions. It is conceivable that at some point in the future, the court itself might say that the rights of a person attached to that unborn child at some point during that period of gestation. I don't know that we're going to see that in our lifetime, but that may happen someday. And if they did, then you would have to have the law would recognize and protect the right of the unborn child at some point.
Okay, interesting thought. Dale Tipton. Dale, you're muted.
Sorry, I did that again.
All right, we're good to go.
Yeah.
The thought was if a home invasion occurs and a pregnant woman is shot and killed by the home invader, killing both her and her baby, that perpetrator can be charged with a double homicide. So doesn't that seem to say through the courts that recognizes life at whatever point that bullet is fired?
Absolutely.
Good point. It's an interesting argument, and I've heard Dr. Ben Carson make the same argument. Yeah. Dale Parrish.
I've been thinking about this a lot. It just seems to me that the key to this whole issue is, when does life begin? When does life begin? And if we can determine that, right or wrong, I mean, if our country, and I'll just say our state, if we can determine one way or another when life begins, then from that point on, if you kill that life, it's murder. So it seems to me the key to the whole issue is, when does life begin?
When does life begin? Marty, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, more states are following. I think Texas started it. I think it's happened in Kansas, and it just happened in Ohio. But the issue that life begins at conception is certainly a religious perspective, but the first heartbeat is literally like days later. And so, that's the law that has been passed in those states. In Ohio, that's what recently prompted, the young girl that was raped to come from Ohio to Indiana, because the law just said that, once there was a heartbeat, and apparently she, had that occur, and they would not perform the abortion there.
Yeah.
And so that seems to be something that I think is getting some steam, and something that people can visually react to.
Okay, I want to check in with Vicki. I saw your hand, and then we'll go to Ken.
Yeah, as far as the heartbeat, that law, the reason they contest it is that's usually at 6 weeks. And 6 weeks, a lot of times, is before a woman finds out she's even pregnant. But I wanted to make a comment on the Catholics believe that life begins at conception. And we just heard that the Jewish people believe that it's at first breath. So I don't know how, if they're killing born babies, that's got to be murder anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Vicki. Ken, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just it seems we've got a brush fire on this topic. I just wanted to bring up a couple of comments that were being made, not really questions, just comments. One is by Scott Goldsberry. He said he thinks heartbeat is life. That's his comment. We also had one from Cheryl Schottmeyer, and she says the fetus cannot be a part of a woman's body. HCG is only produced by the unborn child, not the woman. So that hormone cannot be present unless life is growing in the womb. The fetus cannot stay in the womb. Eventually it will come out, hopefully at full term and healthy.
Okay.
That was an interesting comment.
Okay, those two comments were both interesting. Yeah. Got more?
And we have another one here. This one's a little more daunting. John Holdren, or Jerry Rowe, has brought up that John Holdren, Obama's science czar, was okay and pushed abortion up to the age of 6 in a book he wrote. And he says he has a PDF copy of that book. That might be something interesting to read.
I wouldn't call it abortion if the kid is 5.5 years old.
That's but we're pushing the limits here, so I figured I'd show that one. Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah.
Especially that's 1 year below what is considered the term has been age of reason, which was 7.
Age of reason. Yeah.
Age of reason is the age of 7, and so that's interesting that they took it up to age 6.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Just starts to sound like justification for murder.
Yeah.
We have one more I'll throw up. This is from Rick Lyon. He says, use the rule about when life ends to determine when life begins. When brain function ceases, that it is a legal death. When brain function begins, that should be the beginning of life. That was a comment from our own Rick Lyon.
Brain function. Okay.
So we've been all over the board, but again, I think Brushfire's been a hot on this topic.
And this gives us a glimpse of what our legislators are dealing with this week and next week. It's a very complicated issue. Dale Parrish?
Well, I was gonna comment on Rick's comment there. When do we know if the baby has brain function?
Who knows?
I think
Marty?
there's been studies that show that they respond to music.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that, Rick, or Ken. So the first bones to be formed, fully formed in a baby, are the bones of the inner ear, and that's why science has found this out and have told women that are pregnant, to play soothing music and sounds and things like that. Well, if they can hear those sounds, something's working in the brain that lets those sounds register, because it's not just the bones making the sound, it's the brain registering that.
Mm-hmm.
So while the brain might not be fully formed, those bones they're one of the earliest bones formed in the entire body.
Wow.
And they can hear, and they can react.
Okay, Dale Tipton.
Just a final thought, since we've been all over the board on this topic, it just kind of makes me think, so as a body of people that are residents of a state, do we decide, or does a non-elected panel of medical experts decide?
Well, they had them all there today.
Very good point. Very good point.
I think
how do we decide in a democracy? How do we decide these issues? In a democracy, how do we decide these?
Well, if we were a pure democracy, it would be majority rules. We'd all vote on it. But we're a representative democracy, and we each have a senator and a representative, and that adds up to 150 women and men who are meeting in the General Assembly this week and next, and they will decide. And I'll tell you what, I'm neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them punt and not decide this until next year in the regular session. I wouldn't be surprised.
Really, really.
Okay, Celeste Robbins. Ken, go ahead and read that.
Yeah, Celeste says, this is just really talking about really where we're at now with it. She said, I called both our representatives and senator offices and expressed my thoughts on the subject, and her comments were well received. So again, however that turns out, whether it's a bunch of medical experts or whatever, it still is important for us to raise our voice and let it be heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'd like to thank Celeste for doing that. It's in committee today and tomorrow. It's going to be amended, and then the full House and Senate will be voting on it in the next couple of weeks. And your senator and your representative need to hear from you, So please, I encourage everybody on this call, pass it on to friends, family, everybody.
Yep.
If you got a perspective on this, share it with your representatives, because, if they're not on the committee, they're not hearing the testimony, and they're going to vote on whatever gets presented to them. I will say this, one pastor who spoke today very well, very eloquently, got several questions from the Democrats on the committee. And he actually stopped for a second. He says, I appreciate your questions, because you're the only ones, only the Democrats in this committee are asking me questions. Where are all the Republicans in this committee and in this room that have for 50 years been saying they're going to bring a anti-abortion bill to fruition? Not a single Republican was asking a single question in the hearings today.
That is strange.
Yes.
And that's in the Senate committee, right?
Senate committee. Yeah, this is a Senate bill that is moving forward. And so they divvied this up. It kind of surprised me, because I heard it was starting in the House, but the House took the $225 extra tax rebate from the government, or from the state, and that's the only House bill, and the abortion bill was started by the Senate. So they must have had some last minute wheeling and dealing going on, and decided they'd start it there. So, but every Republican is sitting there with their mouth closed, and we need to, we got a vast majority in this state, and they're not talking up.
Wow. Okay, Ken.
Yeah, one last comment. Scott Goldsberry, I wanted to get this in because he does bring up a good point. He says it should not be left for the doctors to decide. The medical community has lost credibility of late,
Absolutely.
and that's somewhat true.
Good point. Thank you, Scott. Okay, let that be the last word on this. We need to take a little break now, and we'll be right back after after this message from the Lion Truth about free speech.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rick Lyon, and I'd like to talk to you about freedom of speech. In early biblical times, war meant the death of all the vanquished at the hands of the victors. But the victors soon learned it was better to enslave their victims and put them to work for their own advantage than to kill them. Physical slavery gave way to political, economic, and emotional slavery of today. The fear to speak openly and freely against tyranny, corruption, and evil is a form of emotional slavery. As we see in China, an out-of-control government seeks to become the entity to be worshipped through a religion of obedience and the emotion of fear and the stifling of free speech. The Chinese people have been without freedom for so long, especially the freedom of speech, that they no longer remember what it was like to have it and seem to have lost the desire for it. I fear this is happening to us in America. Democracy, while an ideal, is not without its dangers. One of those is the potential for slavery to public opinion. The majority is not always right. Public opinion and the media narrative in today's world of instant news has the power to create erroneous public opinion and suppress truth without shame or consequences. It seems that the loudest voice often rules even when we know they are wrong. But they have no more right to express their opinion than we do. It is only when we allow them to drown out our voices or intimidate us into silence that evil overcomes good. Representative government is unthinkable, in fact, impossible, without freedom of speech, the free expression of the desires and opinions of those who are represented. Our government may not be outlawing free speech directly, but society, public opinion, and the dirt-digging media are destroying it. You have the right to speak, but if you don't use it, you will lose it. Our legislators are mere mortals, and like all of us, they get tired of being badgered or persistently pestered by someone wanting something. What do you want from your legislator? They cannot know if you don't tell them. You need to tell them while you still have the power and the right to tell them, and tell them persistently. It is an old cliche, but nonetheless true, that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Someday, the appearance of a genuine social and spiritual brotherhood will create a society wherein all people delight in living by the golden rule. But such an ideal society cannot be realized when either the weak or the wicked lie in wait to take unfair advantage of those who are devoted to truth, beauty, and goodness. The golden rulers may build a society in which they live according to their ideals, but only if they speak out and defend themselves against others who seek to take advantage of their peace-loving natures and destroy our goal of peace on earth and goodwill to all mankind. Idealism can never survive if the idealists permit themselves to be overpowered, silenced, and eventually exterminated by evil. Only love and brotherhood can prevent the strong from oppressing the weak, but only the unencumbered right to free speech, along with the courage to speak freely without either malice or fear, can prevent the wicked from destroying the righteous. And that is the Lion Truth. Thank you.
Very timely. Thank you, Mr. Rick Lyon. And I want to welcome everybody back to the Roundtable. In this edition, we've been exploring how some of the recent Supreme Court rulings have curtailed government overreach. In the next example, the court rolled back the Environmental Protection Agency's ability to reduce the carbon output of existing power plants, holding that Congress never gave the agency the power to make such regulations. beautiful example of government overreach, unelected bureaucrats legislating. So here's my question, and Vicki, you're on the hot seat first, as always. Beyond the fact that the EPA doesn't have the power to reduce the carbon output of existing power plants, why is this ruling important? Why does this ruling matter? Vicki?
Well, I think it's going to save people money. It's going to save a lot of things money. But most importantly, it's going to uphold Trump's rollbacks.
I didn't hear the end of it. It's going to uphold what?
Trump's rollbacks.
Okay, the rollback. The rollback of government regulations. Is that what you mean? Okay. All right.
Yeah, that Trump did. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Let me go to Gary and ask him to talk about this for a little bit. Why is this ruling so important for us in rolling back government overreach?
It's kind of like Neil Armstrong said, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. If the very first substantive sentence in the Constitution says that all legislative power resides with Congress, and if I had my way, the whole alphabet soup of administrative agencies would either be done away with or greatly curtailed because they are making laws and we, the people, have no influence over what rules they make. So the court kind of said, hey, wait a minute, unless Congress really gives you the power to make this rule, you can't just make it up. And that's a great principle, and I hope it will be expanded by manyfold in the years to come, because the administrative state is in many ways just what's out of control.
Yep. I think you hit the nail right on the head there, and I think in recent decades, I think Congress has been derelict of duty because they pass these laws and then they say the appropriate executive branch agency shall make the rules and the procedures, when Congress should be the one writing the laws. Dale Tipton, did I see your hand come up, or were you swatting a fly away?
Well, no, I just wanted to make a comment. This makes me think, if you think back to Obamacare, right? And Nancy Pelosi making the famous statement of, we have to pass this before we really know what's in it. And that wasn't a slip of the tongue or a misstatement. She was basically stating what has just been stated here. That law had to be filtered through the various administrative agencies to see what the final effect would be. And it's really crazy to think about a legislator voting on our behalf, signing off on something that they can't predict what the end result's going to be.
Good point. And Marty, I think I saw your hand too.
Yeah, I'd like to encourage everybody to look at this. This is, I think, one of the more important bills that they overturned, frankly, because this is like a tip of the iceberg thing. We have lobbyists running through the halls of Congress, but they're talking to a fairly finite group in Congress, and the light sometimes gets shed on them in ways they don't like that. So where do they go? They go to the bureaucratic agencies that Congress has just nonchalantly delegated or relegated their responsibility, to pass laws like the EPA. And this is where lobbyists and big business and our government work hand in hand. This is where it really gets out of control. I mean, when you look at, this is a very high level, general ruling on a regulation on carbon. But, if you look at things like, everything around global warming and water conservation, we've all got 1 gallon flush toilets in our homes right now because the EPA regulated this based on lobbyists who now decided to turn over all new types of toilets, toilet seats, everything, you name it. I mean, it goes where big business picks up on these things and just creates a whole new market for it.
Yeah.
And now you can't reverse it, because we're all indoctrinated into what we got and how we got it. And so, plungers have gone up like crazy because of 1 gallon flush toilets, right? But nonetheless, this is how it works. And this is how big government and big business work hand in glove. And this should be a real eye opener for people to start acknowledging that and understanding it.
So this is a crucial ruling. Okay, Ken, what do you have?
Just another comment that supports what Marty was saying right there. Scott Goldsberry had said this quite a ways back in the comments, but he says, we have a problem here at home allowing big corporations to fund political candidates. Next thing you know, a Republican governor won't support Republicans.
Yeah.
Ooh, Scott, that's pretty close to home.
Very good.
Good insight. Thank you. Okay. Well, we've got one more issue to look at from the Supreme Court. They blocked the Biden administration's vaccine or testing requirement for the nation's largest employers. The court was generally supportive of state pandemic initiatives, but said the federal government lacked the power to impose sweeping requirements on workplaces throughout the country. So here's the question. What role should the federal government have in mandating healthcare decisions for citizens? Vicki, this is the last question of the night. You get first crack at it.
All right. I say none. They use federal agencies that pay for our health care to mandate what we can do. And I don't think they have a right to tell us anything.
Wow, that sums it all up right there. And I really thought, that's a question that could have a one-word answer. None. And any of Susan agrees. Anybody on the screen here want to add to what Vicki said?
Yeah,
Gary,
I'd like to comment on that. As it really is, the Center for Medicare Medicaid Services, because the federal government pays for huge amounts of health care, they make the rules, and we are all living under all kinds of decisions that are mandated by the federal government that we don't even know about. But it is a travesty, and your doctor doesn't decide your healthcare decisions. In many ways, CMS does, and you don't even know who CMS is. And I don't either.
Yeah.
It's the old saw that whoever pays the piper gets to call the tune. And we have somehow allowed the federal government to be the funder. And there are those who want to have single payer health care for everybody in the nation. Can you imagine what a train wreck that could turn into? My, Marty.
Yeah, and I'll give you a recent example. I was at a meeting the other night, and our local fire chief spoke, and he said, in 2019 and 2020, our firemen made more money each year than they've ever made in the last 10 years. Huge, big increase. Okay. And he goes, and it didn't cost the taxpayers a single dime because the federal government, they were given COVID shots to people. So the federal government COVID funding paid for all their overtime, paid for all that effort, and they made a bunch of money. Okay. So these cities, local counties, state, our state takes money. And the minute you take money from the feds, you're playing by their rules.
Yep.
And that's the worst thing you can allow to happen in your state and local government is to get in bed with the feds.
The money always comes with strings attached.
Yes, sir.
It sure does. Well, I think I'm going to call a wrap on that. And I want to thank each member of the roundtable for the hour that you've spent here, and Vicki especially for joining us. And we'll see the roundtable next month. And now here's a video of some young people giving their answers to the question, is the federal government broken?
Our government is definitely broken.
The EPA is totally out of control.
I mean, VA is completely broken.
If a private business were to run things like the government, they would be out of business like that.
Our tax system is ridiculous.
And how are we supposed to pay for that and our student loans and find a place to live with no job? I mean, it's almost as if nobody really cares what happens to us anymore.
There are so many problems that we have, and that's just going to be placed on us.
My generation especially, we need to lead because enough is enough. DC needs to listen, and we need to take the power back to the people.
And so I invite you to join Convention of States right now by visiting that website, conventionofstates.com. That's conventionofstates.com. And we're going to show that to you. And there at the website, you can join Convention of States by signing the petition. You just fill in those text boxes there, and then you click send to my state legislators, that red button there, and you will be a member of the Convention of States movement. Now, if you really want to make a difference, go up to the top menu bar and click where it says Take Action. Once you do that, you'll see the button that says Become a Leader. Click that one, and there you can apply for a leadership position. You see all the kinds of positions that we have, and it doesn't matter what state you live in. This is COS Indiana, but this broadcast is available around the country and around the world, so it doesn't matter what state you live in. You can apply for a leadership position. And so I invite you to visit conventionofstates.com, click Take Action, and help us make history. So now we've come to the end of this month's roundtable. Before I say goodbye, I want to remind you of our email address. If you have any questions at all about Convention of States, tomorrow or the next day or whatever, you can send email to that address right there. raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. Be sure to join in next Monday, August the 1st at 7 p.m. Eastern for our weekly COS Indiana Live, where our special guest will be Dale Tipton, our new grassroots coordinator, and you saw him as part of the panel tonight. And our next roundtable, it will be on the fourth Monday of August. That will be August the 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm John Ackerman for COS Indiana Roundtable. Good night.